Some of us are outwardly successful, but inwardly feel unhappy and living a life lacking in purpose and meaning. The Necktie and the Jaguar by Carl Greer can help you discover what's important to you and how to go for it. For more information or to purchase the book, visit carlgreer.com. That's CARLGREER.com. Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Hello and welcome to Expedition Self. I am Sam Parrotto live, and I'm going to be talking about a super impactful and powerful topic today: victim consciousness. I think it's a plague that's running rampant right now. You know, I've been putting off doing this show for a while because I was kind of nervous about how to talk about it, and I realize it can be inflammatory and it's a bit controversial. So for this reason, I feel like no one really wants to think of themselves in this light. I think we like to see ourselves as heroic and strong and repulsed by the idea that we wouldn't want to take responsibility for our lives. But here's the not great truth about this topic. You've likely got it. It's likely living somewhere unless you've done a heck of a lot of self-work. And if you've done a heck of a lot of self-work and you didn't find victim consciousness, then I would be a little suspect that you actually did the kind of self-work that has you really, really stare this cunning trickster in the face. I want to say this with a whole lot of buildup, is that you have victim consciousness. So the question is, where is it? How did it get there? You know, what did it cost you? And how can you engage with it so that it produces legitimate transformation and growth and development in your life? So I'm going to bob and weave through this subject today, and there'll probably be parts that might be hard to connect with or understand. But, you know, if you'll hang in there and you'll stay with me, I know that your psyche will get what it needs. And I want to say a little bit more about this show and the format that, you know, I talk for an hour and I'm not expecting you to remember what's said in that hour. No, actually, what you want to trust is that the piece of the conversation that's important to you will be recognized by your psyche and picked up as your next step of inner movement. You know, I'm always talking about how do we go inside and what does that really look like? So this is all part of it, which is even how do you listen to my show? Because my topics aren't really intellectual, even though your intellect is listening. It's your unconscious self I'm counting on to pick and choose and collect what's necessary for your next step in development. If we could transform and grow by absorbing intellectual information, then we'd all be gurus living out of our light bodies and leaving our carbon one behind. So I believe the subconscious is always working to get whole, to move through anything that has caused us to leave a piece of who we are behind, or the part that hasn't been uncovered yet. So even though your brain may be saying, wait, what did you say? I didn't get that. Your psyche is either hooked up on the thing it needs to stay with, or it's glossed over that because it wasn't going to be important anyway. You really have to trust yourself, your deepest self, to land on what's needed and what's essential and what's useful to your process. Because I know that listening to someone talk, that's me, for 60 minutes is a big time earful. So one last point about this is why I always hope people will call in, because it does two things. One, if you are the one who's calling in, it'll give your unconscious self a way to process what it's connected with so far. And it gives you the best possibility of snagging a second interest point. Because the way the psyche works, whatever it lands on that it needs, it won't be able to collect any more until that gets some attention given to it. You know, it's kind of like a log moving down a waterway that goes sideways and then blocks all of the other logs. So when you call in, you straighten that log out, or at least there's that possibility that the flow reopens because it's ready for business. The second reason that calling in makes a difference is that you're able to listen to yourself talk about it, to put words on it, to bring it into the light of day. And this is empowering when you're conscious or aware. Oh, sure, you have to manage your inner critic, right? From cringing or revisiting every word you said afterwards. But even that is practice, because you're giving yourself the freedom to talk about your growth process, to reveal what's in your subconscious. And when you do that, you're self-expressing you. And ultimately, there's only one thing that comes out of consciously practicing self-expression, and that is more of life. So lastly, I want to say that when you have an opportunity to listen to someone else process what I'm saying in their words, it helps a ton to distill and condense and rework what's happening in your mind. Just hearing my way of putting it in words, it's just not as good as hearing it said in 4 different ways. So when you call in, you're offering that gift as well to someone else. So I spent a lot of time about why calling in serves you. But with all that said, here's the number. It's 202-570-7057. And I'd ask you to write it down so that when you do feel pulled to call in, you don't have to go hunting. It's 202-570-7057. And also, to help you process, you might want to jot down key words or phrases that come to you as I talk. I see these hour-long shows as like mini growth experiences, so journaling afterwards is a great idea. And of course, lastly, these are recorded shows, so you can find them in the archives at OMTimes Radio. And they're also on all of the podcast and music services like SoundCloud or Spotify, right? All of them. So if you do want to re-listen to a certain section within 24 hours, they're up and ready for that. All right. I think I've said plenty about how to engage and participate and think about the show today. And I'm going to do this show a little different. I'm going to tell a very long story, which I don't usually do, as a way to look at this topic of victim consciousness. But before I do, let me try to describe what I think it is. Victim consciousness is the perception that someone or something is being done to you, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And what happens with that is that it means you were powerless, you had no choice, you couldn't do anything, you were rendered helpless, you had no capacity to change it, and you couldn't respond any differently. It comes out of all the moments of your life when you felt compromised or hurt or disappointed or let down. And, it's a result of being vulnerable and the sensory trauma of it and the way the unconscious has to work with what has happened. So the more we can't handle feeling what's happening, the more we try to escape the feeling of it, the more we vacate our own inner world. Something happens to cause you to feel, and then the inner self divests itself from what it can't feel or handle. And the more that happens, then it appears as if someone or something else is in control. It's tied to our fight or flight power center. Because, in that area of the brain, you're either the predator or the prey. So this is the reptilian brain that's actually processing the difficult moments of your life, but you don't realize it. So think about it. Find a moment when you feel like you had no control, no choice, and it was uncomfortable, unbearable. And then think like an alligator. or a crocodile. So the alligator is either going to attack or run. It sees a threat, and the only thing it can do is enter the battle and win or lose. So we can call this alligator brain. I am suggesting that at the very core of victim consciousness, your alligator self or alligator brain is perceiving you as the strongest or the weakest, and it looks like you're in danger and you have no control to change it. So this is layer 1 of victim consciousness. And because most of us don't relate to ourselves as alligators in a fight or flight scenario, unfortunately, it goes largely unconscious. And that means it influences us without us even realizing. So I want to add in here that anywhere in your growing up that you didn't have enough food, or you were at risk of being harmed, or you perceived that you didn't have what you needed to survive, is being locked into this reptilian part of the brain, wherever you felt emotionally unsafe even. So we're being run by this part of the brain more than we can possibly imagine. And it's coupled with the real parts of our life when we were struggling for survival too. I just can't say it enough. It's playing a much bigger role than we realize. It's running behind the scenes. Because we don't think of ourselves as alligators, we don't associate that same level of primal survival of the fittest to these everyday experiences like, I don't know, driving down the road and dealing with drivers who are inconsiderate or trying, or another one, let me think, trying to get that false charge off of our credit card bill. But this must win to survive thing, it's running behind the scenes. Life or death. It's happening, right? All the time, but we don't quite realize it. So just to give you a way to connect it to your life, think of one time when you did not have enough, when you felt like your physical person was at risk, when you felt like you were put in a position of being overpowered and either fought back or recoiled. So I'm going to take a breath because I have a moment like this and I want to share it with you. And it's going to take me a while to tell the whole story. So I was in 5th grade and there was a girl who said I called her a name. It was a name. It was a word I wouldn't have used. I wasn't one of those kids who naturally cussed. I didn't do that because I was kind of a goody two-shoes. So the very idea that I would call someone a name was completely outside of anything I would do. It was ridiculous. But it was the goody two-shoes part of it that probably activated her stuff and got the whole thing rolling. I don't know, as I look back on it, if there wasn't some moment that I ignored her when she talked, or maybe I was flirting with the boy she wanted, quite honestly, in my small class of 18 people, I can't say I remember seeing her at all, really. But anyway, I'll return to that. So she tells everyone she's going to beat me up after school. And now this is going on all day long, right? During lunch, I'm feeling it. So I come out of the schoolroom at the end of the day. I'm wearing one of my favorite pink dresses and my white patent leather shoes. And it's beautiful, sunny, hot day in Arizona. And there are like, I want to say 11, 12 girls circled around her, waiting for the drama, wanting to see her hit me. I am scared out of my ever-loving mind. I didn't just see one girl that was going to hit me. I saw all 11. And it felt like the mob was actually going to take me out. So I started running. And I didn't know where I was running. I was supposed to actually catch the bus, but I ran in the opposite direction of the bus stop. So I ran and I passed the front office and out the gates. I looked back and I didn't see them. So it felt like maybe they weren't going to follow me or I was going to escape. As I think on it now, I probably shocked her. She wasn't expecting me to just start running. By the way, if you've listened to any other shows, I hate to run. I was running that day. So I ran 2 blocks and I got to Sue Ann Rankin's house. And I pounded on her door and I said, I was crying. I was so terrified. I said, please, please, please let me in. And she said, like through the glass, I can't let anyone in after school. I can't. My mom said I can't. So I stood there for a moment and pleaded with her to no avail. So then I kept on running and running. So I ran 3 more blocks to the library, and for some reason it was closed. And then as I came out of there, I could see them a few blocks down the street. So now I realize they really are actually following me. There were about 8 of them left, I guess. And must have decided they were going to stay together. My brain was not working. All I knew was I was scared out of my mind and I had to get away, right? My alligator mind was in retreat. I definitely felt like the prey. So I crossed one of the 2 main roads that ran through our little town. This was the one that went to the agency in the valley, which was a big deal because I was now making my way to the far side of town. And I didn't know where I was going. I was just trying to outrun her and figured, she'd trail off. So I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to pick up right here when we come back from break and think about there I am and I've crossed this big street and now I'm heading to the other side of town.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Okay, you're back, and we are talking about victim consciousness today. I'm Sam Parrotto, and I was right in the middle of the story, so if you're picking up here, hopefully you will be able to follow where we're headed, because just before we went to break, I said I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was trying to outrun her, and I kept hoping and praying that she would trail off and give up and not follow me so much. So I ran about 4 more blocks and I found a house that was under construction, a rancher, and I made my way through the plumbing pipes and the pieces of wood, my way back, into the back of the house, thinking that they wouldn't look for me here. And so I hid in the cutout for a bathtub in the back room, and I just waited. And I cried and I panicked, hoping that they would walk by. And I listened for them to see, right, thinking I could come out if I heard them walk by and keep going. So then the next thing I know, I hear them and they actually start yelling for me. And they tell me that they know I'm in there and they say, come out, and that I should come out. So I did. And so now I'm standing under this overhang. And all of our streets, they didn't have sidewalks or anything. They were just asphalt streets with a lot of dirt, right? Because in Arizona, it's just desert. So it's hot, and there I am. And so the next thing I know, the girl is kind of pushing it at me a couple of bit, but her grandmother kind of walks across the street and she says, "What are you doing?" And she says it in Spanish. So here's the thing. I ran to her house and I didn't know it. So this grandmother comes out and is talking in Spanish to her. And there's a little bit of English going back too, and says something about what's going on. And then I hear the girl say that I called her a name. And the grandmother turns around and she slaps me across the face. It wasn't hard enough that I hit the ground, but it was hard. And of course, everyone goes, "Ooh," so they got their drama. And I realize now that as I tell the story even today, and I was getting ready, I thought, oh my gosh, she actually was slapping me on behalf of her granddaughter. Because at the time, I didn't actually connect the two. It was like she slapped me for herself, right? Funny how we perceive these things. So about this time, a lady comes out from next door and says, "What's going on?" And I told her. She seemed really nice. And the grandmother tells her something different. And all the while, the girl in my class is watching, kind of gloating, having what looked like, maybe it didn't, but looked like a very satisfied smirk on her face. So the nice lady from next door says to me, "Well, where do you live?" And I say, "Upriver." And that's a long ways away. So she takes me to her house and she calls my mom. So nothing ever happened after that. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't go to school and talk about it. I was left with this horrifying experience that made me feel incredibly unsafe, that at a sensory level was blowing my cells up from the inside out. And not a thing ever got worked through about it. So years later, at a class reunion, I want to say 10 years ago, I talked to this person about what happened. Do you know that she didn't remember it? Not one bit, had absolutely no recollection of it happening. And as I told her, staring dumbfounded that she could forget one of the most significant victim stories of my life, I actually was so traumatized that I couldn't actually stay in the conversation. And I walked away thinking, she doesn't remember. And it was just another piece of the whole story of my feeling victimized. She doesn't remember. She doesn't remember. I can't believe she doesn't even remember what she did to me. Okay, I got that story out. So I have worked on that a lot of times because there were so many pieces of look what someone did to me, look how powerless I was, that I really, I want to say it's taken me easily 15 years to really, really get to the point where I feel mostly neutral about it and I understand it. And I could feel all the pain that I was in and actually feel like I was one with it, right? So I clearly felt like a victim. And she made up this story. She gathered a crowd to intimidate me. Sue Ann Rankin didn't let me in her house. Her grandmother slapped me. There's a long list here. I mean, I think probably anyone would listen to the story and see how I was a victim, how it wasn't right and it was unjust and unfair, that I was treated badly and that my thoughts and my feelings were tromped on and stomped on and I was overpowered. But let's go back through it looking for what there is for me to see, to look for my power, for the idea that I was there, that something about that moment had to do with my life and my experience. You see, the thing about victim consciousness is that it takes painful situations and then turns them into an ideology that's based in having no power. And it actually tries to make that true. You have no power, or not seeing that what there is for me to take responsibility for is hidden from view. because the actions of another are so blatantly predatory or diminishing to me. Okay, so this is the part, right? Victim consciousness takes the real pain of life, the real experience that's happening, and it turns it into a belief system about having no power, or about the idea that I didn't do anything wrong, right? It does stuff with that. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. So there was something that happened between me and this girl. I don't know what it was. I still don't know because she doesn't remember it. But I need to acknowledge that we intersected by the very fact that I was there and she was there. We were in the same class and we occupied the same geographical territory. And although I didn't personally choose to live in that town or go to that school because I was part of a family that was making those choices, it's my life. I have to claim it as mine. So I was there. That's my first piece. I have to get, oh no, I was there. No one made me be there. I was there. I was in that classroom. I was in that town. So let's play out just some examples of what people will typically do. They'll play out the idea that she was jealous of me. And then you would say, well, but you didn't do anything to her. Well, I didn't have to. The fact that I'm me, whether I did anything intentional or not, triggered her. It doesn't have to be my fault that she was triggered, but I can see the power of being me. Remember, I was there. I am me. And the idea that somebody can be impacted and it's not my fault. This is a very, very dicey part of the victim mentality. You're not owning blame when we talk about responsibility. We're owning that we were there as us. Okay, so let's go a bit further. When I saw the mob, I ran. I didn't talk. I didn't walk forward and start the fight. I didn't go back in the schoolroom and find the teacher. No, I ran. So I'm wanting to own that I didn't know what to do. That my fear was so great that I didn't have another option for myself. You see, this is about me. Yes, it was brought on by the experience that looks like she caused it, but it is still about my emotions, my options that I couldn't access, and my experience at that moment. I want to make sure I'm claiming all that is there for me. Now you can see if blame is flying around, this is when we start criticizing ourselves in there too. But the only way to move out of victim consciousness is to keep looking for what was happening for me. What was happening for me? What could I have done, right? What kinds of choices were there that I didn't know I could make? So what happened on that day when she started telling everyone she was going to beat me up was that I began to feel this foreboding terror. And it was the same feeling I'd get when my stepfather would tell me to go get ready, which meant that I was supposed to go lay on the bed with my pants down and wait for him to come and spank me with his belt. This, oh gosh, I'm in trouble and I'm going to get hit space. This is what was present for me all day as she kept letting me know what was going to happen to me. So that in and of itself was important to see, right? Because I get to understand that I'm having a traumatic experience that's already in play, and she is actually triggering that for me. So this thing that there is for me to see, that I was in a scenario that connected with my home life where I couldn't run, or I didn't think I could. You see, this is what's so hard about sorting out victim consciousness. I'm not wanting to take responsibility for someone else's actions in any way. And I'm definitely not wanting to discount the panic and the pain and the hurt and the fear that I was feeling because of it. But I am wanting to make sure I really claim my inner world that was at play. I want to make sure that I claim the idea that I was there, and that even if I didn't know how to use my power, that there was power present. Everyone has power. They may not have power at every layer where they can do something with it, but everyone has power. You know, a lot of times when we're working with victim consciousness, we don't see that we have any. So there's this tier you can think about. Like at the very least, I can always find my power in knowing that I was there. Even if I don't know how I got there, I was still there at that moment. Even if I thought I was making a different choice, I was still there. Or in some people's cases, you can own that you weren't there. Like whatever the scenario is. See, what complicates this is that we want to place blame because something bad happened that made us feel really bad, that we don't think we're supposed to have to feel. We don't think life's supposed to go this way. We're not supposed to get hurt. And this, of course, invites this victim consciousness in a big way. Knock, 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 here I am. You see, it's not that I wasn't hurt by what happened. I was devastated on so many levels. But I want to make sure I see my power and what I did or didn't do with it, if I can see any of that. And I want to be willing to really deeply grieve and feel saddened for what happened. A lot of times when you listen to someone who is really locked into their victim consciousness, they want someone else to pay for causing their feelings, rather than actually doing the work of healing and grieving and feeling their own feelings. They want to hold someone else responsible for making them feel something when our feelings originate in our own skin. I might even say that a lot of victim consciousness is wanting someone else to pay for what we felt rather than being willing to pay attention to what happened for us and really care about our pain and our suffering and where our power was. Now, I'm going to say this again. I thought it was kind of clever how it came out, which is that victim consciousness is wanting someone else to pay for what we felt rather than being willing to pay attention to what deeply happened for us and really care about where our power was. So you're listening to my story and you're listening to me talk about that one of the ways that you start breaking down victim consciousness is to really get that you are there, that you are in that moment, and that you do have power even if you couldn't see it. And that a lot of times that power isn't about changing the hurt or what happens. It's about dealing with it and being in it. I think a lot of us think, if I had power, this wouldn't happen. But I don't think that's often true. Like a lot of times things happen in life that our power is in how we relate to it, how we get ourselves there, how we see what was really going on. And then that's a growth mind, right? Because we're trying to make sense of our journey, of our unique path, and what lessons are we working with, and what is the pain of our life, the core pain. I think the hardest thing in the whole story for me has to do with the grandmother slapping me. She looked like the one with all the power and the one who could have done something different and been wise, and that her touching me was not okay and unfair and unjust. So what is there for me to see in that? Well, first, that I was devastated by her choice, to notice how resentful I was, to see that I felt treated unfairly. And of course, she hit me just like my stepdad did. So there's something to see about what happens when, in that moment when I was hit, and how it diminishes my sense of self. But there's also something else to see. Now, hold on. This is going to sound really controversial. I could have hit her back. I could have screamed at her. I could have gone to the police or the school or told my mother afterwards. There really were actions I could have taken in the moment and afterwards that just didn't seem possible to me. They just weren't viable. They just didn't seem like I could do them. I didn't even think of them. So this is the second tier of working through victim consciousness. It's taking the case that I had power maybe to do something different, but I couldn't. And let me tell you that when you work on this layer, it's really hard because you have all kinds of reasons why you didn't do that thing you could have done, but didn't realize you could. Super duper hard. And when you're captured by your inner workings of your psyche, a lot of times all of those other choices seem completely beyond reach or realization because they actually are. There was no way I would have imagined hitting that grandmother or even screaming at her. I was too busy cowering, feeling guilty, like there was something wrong with me, that I did something wrong and that I deserved what was happening. It was not possible. But was there power to do it? Yes. It doesn't mean that you had no power, and it doesn't mean that there isn't loads of personal emotional processing and feeling of your sensory experience that doesn't need to be done. So I want you to think about this, right? We're not blaming me. We're saying what was possible for me. And when we start to think about these things in our own lives with the intention to see, where is my victim consciousness? Where is it at play? Where do I look for somebody else to hold responsible for my pain and suffering? This is the kind of thinking that we want to go into. All right, when we come back from break, we'll continue on this line.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Okay, we're back. You are listening to Expedition Self, and we are talking about victim consciousness today. And Diane is here to share a little bit about, I think, your thoughts or your feelings about what you think of victim consciousness.
Well, I'm going to share a thought, and I wondered how it played, because as I listened to you, I had it running through my head as to how can you, within the moment, decide to do something different if the fear and the fact that you are scared out of your ever-living mind. How do you, what can you do to get yourself where you feel safe enough? Like you said, you would have never hit that grandmother, but had you felt safe, would you have gotten courage to, do you think you would have gotten courage to maybe do something different? Or did it happen so fast and you can be so scared that you don't think about it until after the fact?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think when you're that scared, you can't do anything different. That right? I mean, because if I could have done something different, I would have. I think to look at the culture or the environment that we're all in, to think about how we create it to be safe enough that I might have gone to a teacher, or I might have gone to the office as an option, and actually believed that someone could help me work through that. I think that really becomes like the best that we could hope for as we keep evolving as a human race. I do think, though, as an adult, I've had to work through that very same moment in my adult life where unconsciously I'm experiencing the very same trauma. And now I have to think about, wait a minute, I have power here. What can I say? What can I bring to this moment? What can I create here? And so that's one of the advantages to working with this idea of victim consciousness, is that we actually start recreating and reframing by actual practice the situation where we couldn't access our power and begin to access it as adults.
So if by chance a different scenario would come up, and we do this process that you are talking about and working it, that I might possibly not get as scared and find my power quicker.
I think what happens really, I mean, there's been 100 moments that I've been in where I thought I was in trouble as an adult for something. And if I can bring more consciousness to that, I'm able to actually find words to describe what's happening for me, where I can actually be vulnerable in it, or I can realize I have more choices than the singular one that I thought I had, which was to run all the way across town. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes. Thank you very much.
Well, and thank you for waiting. I know you waited there for a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
So just to add a little bit more to what I was saying is, victim consciousness, you don't just say, oh, I'm not going to be a victim here, and you're going to stop. Because everything about these moments where we want to hold somebody else responsible for it are also moments where we have to find all the options and all the possibilities and all the choices. So it really is a lifetime of work. And of course, the more we work on it, then the more we are able to help other people work on it too, because victim consciousness is kind of contagious. And it gets bigger and bigger, and one promotes or one bumps up against another. So, all right, let me see. Let's go back to the part where I was about my story. I just want to put the final pieces of this, which is that I could have walked into town rather than towards residential, right? I still, though, have to deal with all these feelings of powerlessness and helplessness and self-criticism and self-hate. And that's the stuff that most of us want to move past. We want to just get into the future. We want to just have a happy day. We want to just be positive. I just don't think that's how we really heal and grow, really. See, one of the reasons we stick with victim consciousness is because if we actually drop into having power, then we have to deal with questioning why we didn't act on our power, why we let something happen. We have to deal with our own self-blame. And this is something most of us, I think, try to avoid with everything we've got, right? Because even though self-blame and self-criticism, it dogs us our whole life, and it attaches itself to lots of moments that don't warrant it, right? But it's inside of these moments that we don't spend enough attention on to go in and really claim and own and look at what was happening for us. Yeah, I'm suggesting that if we do the work in the moments when it really happened for us, right? We work on it now for what happened then, that it wouldn't dog us in all of these other ones. So this idea of breaking through victim consciousness, it starts with a real willingness to feel and to suffer and to have pain, to grieve and to process emotionally this experience of vulnerability. That you can be hurt, that things do feel unfair, that they are unfair, and that you have to be willing to experience all that's involved in that in your body. Because when you don't, it has to go somewhere. And the brain's way of handling all of that is to process it through the alligator brain of predator and prey. And if you're left with that, then you're not going to be able to get your own power so easily. So the next layer has to do with getting your own power in that you were present or you weren't, or you participated without blame or judgment, without making it mean anything about who you are or what's wrong with you or what you deserve. The mind hates this. The reptilian mind, the psyche wants to have extra meaning attached to seeing this, right? So it's really hard. We want to have a reason for it to happen. We don't even realize, though, that when we try to go find that reason, half the time that reason renders us with less, not more. I just have to own that I was in class with her. I did go out of class that afternoon and I did run. No impressions about why I did it or what it means about me, just that I was there and it happened. And that means it's part of my life and of my story. Think of it like this. Some situation is happening right now in every city in the world. And although it is part of your life, you don't know about it. You aren't connected with the people going through it, and you're certainly not standing 5 feet from it happening. That's what there is to own, that this is happening in your life and you are there. There's no victim in this. It's just claiming what's true about your presence and participation in life. And then you work this next layer, which has to do with all the possibilities of your power finding a voice in that moment, or a capacity to act or move or respond or relate. There's so much to be sensitive to in this layer because so often there are choices, but they just don't seem possible. Remember when I mentioned I could have hit her back? Imagine a 10-year-old hitting a grown woman. I'd say I'd never do that because you respect your elders, or I would have been afraid of getting hit again. But it was a choice, even if it wasn't one I wanted or even could imagine making. So this helps to realize that we aren't going through life waiting for someone to do something to us that we have no control or influence with. We're human beings having an experience of life. And it's up to us to claim that experience, every single part of it, which includes the hurt and devastation and confusion and self-hatred that comes from interactions and relationships and situations like the one I just described. And if we don't claim it, then it morphs into victim consciousness. That's becoming a mouthful today. And it layers itself inside each and every moment of our lives. If we can't be with what's going on for us, then we'll instead interpret everything through the lens of what is happening to us that we don't control or have power over. It's like this subtle displacement that makes it easier to deal with. Even though we hate how it feels, we still would rather feel like victims than feel what really happened and find a way to sort out our self-assessment from it. Remember, I said that for me to own that I was there or that I didn't act is to also own what I think about myself or what I don't want to be true about myself. Yeah, I don't want to be weak or selfish or cowardly. So anything that happened in that story that points to that, I'm going to shy away from it. In my story, was I someone who was selfish and she was affected by it? Or maybe I felt guilty about having things she didn't. And so if I acknowledge that I was there and it was happening, then I have to feel responsible for her feelings. That's the trouble with it all. Underneath, we have this place where we are taught to be responsible for other people's experiences, which basically means we're not responsible for our own. It's another big part of this victim consciousness stuff. You know, we're taught in our families that we're responsible for what other people are feeling or how they react. Sometimes it's blatantly expressed, right? And sometimes it's more subtle. So as children, we're absorbing this thing for others, but we don't then get encouraged to be responsible for our own stuff. Now, I want to reiterate again, being responsible does not mean being to blame. It actually means that we're having an inner experience, that we're feeling things, that we think things, that we're having unconscious reactions. But it's so much easier to tie everything to someone else's experience, especially if they believe it too. So is it safe to say we're experiencing victim consciousness all the time? Probably. Anytime it feels like someone else is doing something that you get hurt by or you feel invalidated by, it's likely you're feeling some little piece of this. I had a friend who, when she visited, she would talk about her life and what she needed. This is another story. I think I have enough time. So she wanted me to spend time talking to her husband. And this one visit, I find out that her husband said, don't share anything because I don't want to have to talk about our life. So now it looked like I was the one initiating all of this, when I was really thinking I was responding to what she was asking for and needing. But she let me take the fall with her husband. Now, I got to tell you, I was feeling totally victimized. Like she did something to me. She's the reason I was being that way at all. And I was being helpful to her. And now her husband doesn't like it. She lays it at my feet. You can see this, right? So if we work with the layers I spoke about, the first thing I have to get in touch with is that I was present. I was present doing something, right? I was talking and engaging. So what is it that it's meeting in me? What need is getting worked with? And I need to get in touch with the feeling that goes with being a helper, right? That's not her that's doing that. That's my inner motivation. So when we're breaking down victim consciousness, when this happens, we want to see where what's going on inside is a match for that if we can. Not the cause of it. It's not your fault, right? It's not my fault. It's how did I show up? How did I participate? So if we return to my mob story, the match for why I didn't fight back when I was at the school with words or fists had to do with my inner story of being a good and nice girl. And further, I didn't want to be a mean and violent person like my stepfather. So there really was no access to being that way, even if it was a choice that was possible. So in this story with my girlfriend, because I see myself as a helper, the very idea that I would say no or back away wouldn't have been something I would do. Unless I got more conscious, of course. And just because it goes sideways at the end doesn't mean that I can all of a sudden be a victim, because the thing that grabbed a hold of me to begin with and had me stay in those conversations was the very thing that housed my choice. Was I hurt? Yes. Did I feel disappointed? Yes. Was it her fault? No. She was being her. He was being him. Is there stuff for me to see about how I interacted with them and how I made sure their power was present in their choice or wasn't? Sure. So when we're working with victim consciousness, we have to look at where we have feelings and then hold someone else responsible for those feelings and the outcomes. Where we form expectations about how others should be, often using our own belief systems, and then are devastated or angry or flipped out because of how it gets handled. So, victim consciousness breeds more victim consciousness until everyone is bloodied. And because its very existence is based on finger pointing and blame and holding others responsible for what happens to us. There's something valuable about all of the victim consciousness making its way to the surface, but the danger in it, which is what I see a lot of, is that there's this massive lean towards the victimization being justified and being validated and revalidated. And the more there's someone to push off against and fight, the more it grows. So one side makes the other side louder, bigger, and more volatile and hostile. And each side is reacting to the victimization in the other side feeling justified. So this happens in small scale in your everyday life, but it's happening in our society and in our social spaces, in our families, and in our political system. I encourage you to think real deeply about victim consciousness. I may do another show. I think I have about 5 more pages of notes here, but I want to make sure I can read you this poem that I found by Mona Martinez before we close. And I do want to say again, victim consciousness is running rampant right now. And the only way we can bring it into play is by looking inside. So, okay, here we go. It's called Don't Be a Victim of Any Kind Anymore. I no longer play the victim. That no longer who I am. I'm the girl who finds my own way, not afraid to ask for help, because it will only help me go far. I no longer play the victim. I can do for myself. Even when I'm injured, I will find my way. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm no longer the victim. I say what's on my mind and bite my tongue when I will only create more drama. It who I am and who I will continue to be. No longer a victim to people hating who I want to be, to me hating where I can't be. Actions speak louder than words. And right now, they are saying, he has blossomed into be nobody's fool, the boy who was taunted and bullied at school. Oops. You know what? I really screwed that up because the last words, I'm going to go back, is no longer a victim to people hating who I want to be, to me hating where I can't be. Actions speak louder than words, and right now they are saying. I blended into another poem. Anyway, thank you so much for being with me today and talking about victim consciousness. And I am apologizing for messing up that poem at the end. I hope you have an awesome week and you are able to look a little closer inside you.